Hello and welcome to Unit 2.3 Notes. Today we're going to talk a little bit about strategy and some of the events that are happening in the American Revolution, especially in the fall of 1777. Now, of course, we've talked a little bit about strategy before. We talked about one of the things that the Patriots wanted to do strategy-wise at the beginning of the war was to go up to Canada, basically win at Canada, gain the support of some of the Canadians, and then use that against the British. So that was one of the strategies early on that the Patriots had. A strategy, of course, is a plan of action to follow. What we're going to talk about today is one of the British strategies that they try and employ in the fall of 1777, and that is to basically try and cut off the New England area from the rest of the colonies. So at this particular time period when movement of troops, movement of materials are pretty important, if you could isolate one particular part of the country that you're fighting, in many ways you could essentially cut that off from the rest of the country. And so this would be a big advantage for the British if they could pull it off. So if we look at this map, we can kind of see what the British want to do. This is upper New York State. And so what's happening is you've got the British moving down along the corridor right south of Lake Champlain. You've got another British regiment coming in from the west, and the goal was they were going to kind of meet in this area here along the Hudson River, and if the British were able to win this, they would be able to occupy this entire corridor here and cut off New England from the rest of the states. So what we have is a British general, General Burgoyne, is coming down the south. Here's Fort Ticonderoga. That's the fort that we talked about early in the war. This is the fort that the Americans were able to capture early on and then use a lot of those cannons down in Boston. So as we keep this in mind, kind of notice what's happening here. We have the red line, which is British troop movement, and then we have the blue, which is the American troop movement. So if you look at this map, you can kind of see what happens, but the British are not able to connect and meet up along the Hudson River like they had planned. Now the general that's moving from the north to the south is John Burgoyne, and he was a British general, often referred to as Gentleman Johnny. He was kind of an interesting character. He liked kind of living a very extravagant lifestyle, was used to living a very rich lifestyle, and for many people that kind of rubbed him the wrong way. He did have a very interesting life, though. He was also a playwright. He wrote several plays that were actually well respected in theatrical circles. So he's marching from the north down into this valley, and he makes a couple of miscalculations here as he's moving south. And here's a picture of him, very dashing portrait of the general. So his plan is to march down this corridor, and he's hoping, or his plans at least are, that there's a lot of loyalists in this area, and the loyalists are going to help him out. And also there's going to be Native Americans in the area that are going to be loyal to the British, and they're going to help General Burgoyne out as well. When we think of troop movements today, we would probably think of getting a lot of people on an interstate highway and using the existing interstate highways that we have. Back then, they did not have those. So General Burgoyne is moving about, I think they estimate like 6,000 to 7,000 people in his entourage. Some are British troops. He does have some Native American scouts with him. He has some German troops. So he's moving about 6,000 to 7,000 people down an area that really isn't intended for large numbers of people to travel. So they have a group ahead of them that's cutting down trees and, for all basic purposes, making a road as they go. And that's going to take a lot more time than he had planned. And again, he thought that there's going to be lots of help from the loyalists in the area, the Native Americans in the area. Everyone's just going to kind of rally around the British and help him out, and that really doesn't happen for him. So he's delayed a lot more than he thinks he's going to be, and that's part of the problem for the British in this plan. So the major topic of this section of notes is the battle known as the Battle of Saratoga. This happens at Saratoga, New York, so upstate New York. It happens in September and October of 1777, and I say those 2 months because technically it's the battles of Saratoga. There's two battles here. One takes place, and it's sort of a British victory, the first battle, and then 18 days later, on the same piece of land. There's a second battle. This one, the Americans win fairly decisively. So I guess one moral of the story here is if you're going to win a battle that's fought consecutively, make sure that you win the last one. So this is going to be a huge battle for a couple reasons. And if we look on this map here, we'll get kind of a close-up. We're talking about right here as far as where Saratoga is at. So in the current day state of New York. Now, the reason why we're talking about the Battle of Saratoga is because it is identified by essentially all historians as the turning point of the war. And it's not particularly because of the land that is acquired. It does prevent the British from coming down and kind of isolating the New England states from the rest of the colonies. So it is important geographically as far as kind of what happens and who's able to control that particular corridor of the Hudson River. But the reason why the Battle of Saratoga is such a turning point is because of what happens just a couple days after that. Here's a picture of the Battle of Saratoga and the British surrendering. So the reason why the Battle of Saratoga is so important to this war is because this officially convinces the French and then shortly thereafter the Spanish to formally become allies of the United States and join us in the war against England. So France, for example, at the beginning of the war was giving us some aid. They were giving us a little bit of financial support, but they weren't officially our ally. And a lot of that had to do with the French didn't want to jump in and formally support a group of people that really didn't have a chance of winning the war. Because once France officially joins us, it becomes their war as well. So if France joins us and we lose the war, we meaning the colonies, then the French are also going to have to either possibly give up some land or pay some war reparations, all kinds of things. So the French don't want to really officially join us until it looks like we have a pretty good chance of winning. So one thing that I always explain to students is it's kind of like, you know, your friend wants you to bet on a football game, but you're not really sure if you want to make the bet or not. And it's kind of like you have the opportunity to wait until halftime. And if that team is up at halftime, you think maybe that you're confident enough to make that bet. That's kind of what France is doing. Now, France, again, is giving us kind of some stuff under the table. They're sending us some money, they're sending us some ammunition, they're sending us some gunpowder, but it's not an official alliance yet. Now, once the Americans win this battle, and this is kind of a conventional battle, that's kind of why it's important. The British want to fight a particular way. The Americans, for the most part, don't really want to fight that traditional kind of battle style, but they do in this battle and they win. So now it becomes even a little bit more obvious that they do have a real chance of winning this war, even fighting the conventional methods that the British want them to. So I believe it's 2 days after word comes across the ocean. Ben Franklin is in France at this time trying to convince the French to help out the Americans officially. Once word goes across the ocean and it gets to France, Ben Franklin tells the French officials, and I think it's 2 days later that they officially sign the papers to become allies of the United States. So it is a direct correlation to winning this particular battle. So the reason why this is important is we now have additional sources of funding. So we've talked about many times, you know, this is a new government that's just kind of created out of thin air. They don't have any revenue streams. They don't have any taxes coming in. The United States has nothing as far as money or revenue. Basically, they are borrowing money to be able to fight this war. So now they have funding from both France and Spain. They're able to get more supplies, and things like gunpowder was a key thing because they got all of their gunpowder before the war from England. And throughout the war, George Washington, especially in the first couple of years, repeatedly exaggerated the amount of gunpowder he had so that people wouldn't become overly concerned, but they really were low on gunpowder for much of the war. So they're able to get things like gunpowder, rifles, guns, and then a little bit of foreshadowing here, naval support. So one of the things the United States really struggled with early in the war was not having an established navy. It takes a long time to build up a navy, build the ships, train the people that are going to be sailors on those ships. But France and Spain already have fairly powerful navies already. So we're going to see in one of the final battles here coming up that we talk about, the French in particular are going to help us out greatly with how they use their navy. So that's why the Battle of Saratoga is so important, because it allows France and Spain to feel confident enough to say, yes, we want to formally join you in this war. And once they join us, then they officially also declare war on England. So, and this is not unusual for France. France and England are continually fighting each other, but now they are officially part of this war, and it's no longer just the colonies against the British Crown. So that is section 3 in Unit 2. A little bit about what's happening in the fall of 1777. There's still a long way to go. The war is not close to being over. It's actually going to go on for several years here, but this is kind of the turning point and begins to tip in the colonists' favor. So thanks, and if you have any questions, definitely let me know. But those are the notes for section 3 on Unit 2.